Hello everybody and welcome to Eye Opener. This is Dr. Mridula V. Amarnath here. So today I am going to discuss a very beautiful and interesting chapter, which is the uvea. Uvea actually forms a link between ophthalmology and general medicine. If you carefully look at the eyes and pick up those small features, and along with the necessary investigations, you can actually come to a conclusion which would be most likely a medical disorder. Okay, so sit back and enjoy this beautiful chapter. So fine, let us begin our topic for today, the uvea. So this eyeball has three layers. Okay, it is the outer fibrous layer, middle vascular layer and inner nervous layer. Now this middle vascular layer is called as the uvea, and it is divided into three parts from anterior to posterior as iris, ciliary body and choroid. So inflammation of the whole part of the uvea is called as uveitis, and inflammation of just the iris is called as iritis, and inflammation of the pars plicata is called as anterior cyclitis. So together the inflammation of both the iris and the pars plicata is called as iridocyclitis or anterior uveitis. Okay, now this form of uveitis, that is the anterior uveitis, is the most common form. Okay, now this anterior uveitis is again of two types. You have a granulomatous type and a non-granulomatous type. Now what are the conditions where you get granulomatous uveitis? So remember, it is very important to know these causes because they are generally asked in MCQs. So now I've got a mnemonic for you for the causes of granulomatous uveitis, that is, both have late syphilis. So B stands for brucellosis, O is for onchocerciasis, T is for tuberculosis, H is for herpes simplex, HAV is herpes zoster virus, late L leprosy, and syphilis S is syphilis plus sarcoidosis. So now I'll be talking to you about certain key points in each of these conditions which I've mentioned. So first is sarcoidosis. In sarcoidosis you will have to remember two conditions. One is a Lofgren syndrome. Now here it is erythema nodosum plus bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy plus acute iritis. And the second one is Hereford syndrome or uveoparotid fever, wherein the patient will have uveitis plus parotitis plus fever and a facial nerve palsy. Okay. Next, coming to syphilis. Now in syphilis, you should remember that anterior uveitis is most commonly seen in the late congenital infection. And now here they'll have this characteristic iris roseolas. Coming to leprosy, the leprosy is most commonly seen in lepromatous leprosy. And here the pathognomic feature is they have iris pearls. Right? Now coming to herpes, both herpes simplex and herpes zoster. Now here remember they have a stellate keratic precipitates along with a sectoral iris atrophy, and more importantly they have an ocular hypertension, that is increased IOP. So now we're done with granulomatous uveitis. So we know the causes and some key points in each of those conditions. Next we come on to non-granulomatous uveitis. Now this again is of two types. You have an acute and a chronic one. So now you will have to know the causes of acute non-granulomatous anterior uveitis. So again I've come up with a mnemonic for you. So the mnemonic is IPL is broadcast live DTH. So I stands for idiopathic, P is for Posner-Skolsman syndrome, L is lens induced, the I again is for IBD, broadcast, the B is for Behçet's, live, the L is for leptospirosis, then you have D is drug induced, T is TINU, and H is HLA-B27. So now again I'm going to give you some key points in these conditions. So first one is idiopathic. Now, idiopathic, it is the most common cause. Okay. Next, coming to HLA-B27, is nothing but seronegative spondyloarthropathies. So in that, I'll be talking to you about ankylosing spondylitis. Now here it is usually unilateral, and these patients will come with a history of lower back pain and stiffness, and most of them, nearly 90% of them, are HLA-B27 positive. Okay. Next is Ritter syndrome. Now again here, the anterior uveitis is usually unilateral and recurrent. they'll also have a history of travel. Okay, and here you should remember a triad. That is, it is a triad of urethritis, conjunctivitis and arthritis. The next one is psoriatic arthritis. Now here the anterior uveitis is usually bilateral. They also have nail pitting, plaque formation and sausage digits. Okay, fine. And the other ones are, one is your Behçet's disease. So in Behçet's you have bilateral recurrent anterior uveitis with a mobile hypopia. Then as you have inflammatory bowel disease, you have ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. Anterior uveitis is more common in ulcerative colitis. Okay, then you have lens induced. So mainly you have a phacoanaphylactic uveitis, wherein the patient will usually have a unilateral anterior uveitis, and because of either a surgical or a traumatic disruption of the lens capsule, what happens is there's a leakage of proteins and usually mature or a hypermature cataract, causing a phacoanaphylactic uveitis. You should also know what is a UGH syndrome, that is uveitis plus glaucoma plus hyphema, most commonly seen in an ACIOL lens. When you put a lens in the anterior chamber, there is usually disruption, and this is causing uveitis, glaucoma plus hyphema. Then you should know what is Posner-Skoltzman syndrome. So here the patient will have unilateral recurrent anterior uveitis plus an increased IOP. Next is drug-induced uveitis. Okay, so you should again know a mnemonic for that. I've written CML, please relapse slowly. Okay, where C is for cytophovid, M is for metoprolol, L is for lanternoprost, please the P is for pilocarpine, relapse the R is for rifabutin, and slowly the S is for sulfonamide. So with that we finished the acute causes of non-granulomatous anterior uveitis. So in that I've told you the causes and some important points in each one of them. Okay, so now we'll move on to the chronic part. Okay, so in this first condition which you'll have to remember is juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Now this is the most common disorder associated with anterior uveitis in the pediatric age group. And it is characterized by arthritis greater than 6 weeks of duration. Fine. So you should know that anterior uveitis is most common in type 1 seronegative pauci-articular juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Fine. So now you remember it's of two types. You have a pauci-articular where only less than 4 joints are involved, and you have a polyarticular where greater than 4 joints are involved. Fine. Now in pauci-articular again you have type 1 where it's most commonly seen in girls, and type 2 most commonly seen in boys. So now this anterior uveitis is most commonly seen in type 1 seronegative pauci-articular juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Another thing which you have to remember is IOL implantation, this lens implantation is contraindicated in juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Very commonly asked question. And now in this juvenile idiopathic arthritis there is no congestion seen. So it is most commonly also known as white eye disease. So the next condition is Fuchs' heterochromic iridocyclitis. Now remember, this is an important topic. Lot of MCQs and questions come from this. So here the patient will usually have a unilateral anterior uveitis and presents with complaints only of floaters. Okay, so I put a mnemonic over here. No Fuchs, where no is no posterior synechiae, F is floaters, U unilateral condition, C they will have cataract, H heterochromia iridis, and S is for stellate capes. So what are the signs that you see in Fuchs? One is heterochromia iridis. So what happens is there is an early loss of this iris crypts. Remember, that is the earliest sign. Okay, so now this will lead to a diffuse iris stromal atrophy. They'll have a characteristic moth-eaten appearance. And now this can cause to hypochromic heterochromia iridis. Okay. Then next you also have an Amsler sign. Now what is this? On gonioscopy, if you see, you will see fine radial twig-like vessels near the angle. That is called as Amsler's sign. Cataract is seen in nearly 80% of the cases, and they usually have a posterior subcapsular cataract. Okay. Glaucoma is again seen around 25 to 60% of cases. Then you also have capes. Now the KPs here are stellate shaped keratic precipitates. Fine. And then there is no posterior synechiae noticed here. So now coming to the symptoms of anterior uveitis. So first one is they'll have a pain. Now this pain is usually a dull aching pain along the branches of the trigeminal nerve, so to the forehead, scalp, and it's usually worse at night. Okay, then you have redness, then you have photophobia, lacrimation. Now why is this? It is basically because of the reflex sensory between the sensory fibers of the 5th cranial nerve and the motor fibers of the 7th cranial nerve, which supplies the orbicularis oculi muscle. Okay, and then you also have a blurred vision. Now why is that? One is because of the aqueous turbidity. Okay, then you also have a corneal haze. The cornea becomes slightly edematous. Then you have an induced myopia because of the ciliary spasm, and sometimes because of certain complications like cataract and glaucoma that can also eventually lead to a blurring of the vision. So next I'll come to the signs. Now anterior uveitis cases are always examined with a slit lamp biomicroscope. So first is you will notice a circumcorneal or a ciliary congestion. Then what are the corneal signs? One, there will be corneal edema. This can be because of the action of the toxins or the raised IOP. Second is keratic precipitates. Now this is very important. Now what are these keratic precipitates? These are nothing but inflammatory cells, and they are seen on the corneal endothelium. Okay, and they are most commonly located inferiorly, having a triangular pattern with its apex pointing up. And now what is this triangle called? It's called an Arles triangle. Now why do these particles usually settle inferiorly? One, because of the result of gravity, and two is because of the normal convection flow of the aqueous. So there are different types of KPs. One is you have mutton fat KPs. Now this is most commonly seen in granulomatous uveitis. Now these are usually large, fluffy, and mainly composed of macrophages. Then you have fine KPs. Now these are seen in non-granulomatous uveitis, the acute type. Okay, now here these are mainly small, whitish in color, and they're composed of lymphocytes. Then you have pigmented KPs. Now this is seen in non-granulomatous uveitis, the chronic type. So remember, they'll be pigmented and they'll have a crenated edges. And then you have stellate KPs. Remember, I had already told you about stellate KPs. Try and recollect which all conditions you get. That one is you get in herpetic uveitis, toxoplasmosis, and Fuchs. Now these are mainly fine and fibrillar, and they have a diffuse distribution. So remember, keratic precipitates is an important question, and you will have to give an extra attention to this. So then coming to the anterior chamber signs, you have two things. One is you have the aqueous cells and aqueous flare. Now what is aqueous cells? These are the early and the definitive signs of active inflammation. So they mainly indicate the disease activity, and their number, it reflects the severity. Okay. Then you also have neutrophils, which are the main cells that are present in these aqueous cells. Then you have aqueous flare. This is the translucence of the aqueous because of its high albumin content. And how do you recognize them? They are seen as the suspended or moving particles in a beam of light. So just imagine when you go to a movie theater, when the lights are all switched off, you just look back and you'll see a narrow beam of light, right? Which projects the movie onto the screen. Similarly, it is similar to that. Okay, and it is called as the Tyndall effect or the Brownian movement. Then you see hypopyon. What is hypopyon? It is nothing but pus in the anterior chamber. Now where do you get a shifting hypopyon or a mobile hypopyon? One is Behçet's, and a dense immobile hypopyon you mainly see in HLA-B27 diseases. Okay. Next is what is hyphema? It is nothing but blood in the anterior chamber. Even that is also seen in cases of certain cases of uveitis. Now I've got a mnemonic for you where you get causes of hyphema. It is called HOTS, where H is for herpetic uveitis, O is for ophthalmic nodosa, T is for trauma, and S is for syphilis. So iris signs. One is in acute cases, you have the iris which is mainly edematous and has a spongy appearance. It gives you a characteristic muddy feeling. Okay, appearance. Whereas in chronic cases, because of the repeated attacks, the iris becomes atrophied. So you get a sectoral iris atrophy, commonly seen in herpetic uveitis, or a diffuse iris atrophy, which is seen in Fuchs' heterochromic iridocyclitis. Next is iris nodules. Now, iris nodules is commonly seen in chronic anterior uveitis. Now, there's again of two types. You have Koppe and Busaka. Now, Koppe is most commonly seen along the pupillary margin, and it is seen in granulomatous as well as non-granular matters. Whereas Busaka is seen along the collarettes, in the mid-iris. Okay, and this is seen only in granulomatous uveitis. So remember, iris nodule is an important MCQ question. Fine, so have a look at this picture. Now can you tell me what it is? Yes, it is the characteristics Koppe nodules. So fine, next coming to the posterior synechiae. Now here what happens? Now there is an outpouring of exudates into the pupillary area. Okay, so then there is an adhesion of the pupillary margins to the lens capsule, and then it leads to a membrane formation. Now sometimes you can have a localized posterior synechiae. So when you have a localized posterior synechiae and when you dilate the pupil gets a festooned shape, so it becomes a festooned pupil. Okay. Or else next condition is you can have an annular synechiae or a ring synechiae or a seclusio pupil. Now here what happens, the posterior synechiae is present in the 360-degree direction. On all sides the posterior synechiae is present. So there is no aqueous flow from the posterior chamber to the anterior chamber. So what happens is the anterior chamber becomes shallow, it becomes an iris bombae, and this can lead to a secondary angle closure glaucoma. The third one is you have a total posterior synechiae, which means there's complete adhesion of the posterior epithelium of the iris to the lens surface. Okay, so now here because of the outpouring of the exudates, the adhesion is complete between the posterior surface of the iris and the lens capsule, right? And this causes a deepening of the anterior chamber. Now there is also outpouring of exudates behind the lens, and that forms a cyclitic membrane, and it covers the ciliary body and the posterior surface of the lens also. Now these exudates along with the cyclitic membrane causes a complete damage of the ciliary process, and you know that the ciliary body and the process is important for aqueous secretion. So when this is damaged, it can cause a decrease in the aqueous secretion and finally cause a hypotony. So I hope I was clear with the posterior synechiae, wherein you have a localized posterior synechiae, or it can either be an annular or a ring-shaped synechiae, or it can be a total posterior synechiae. If it is a total posterior synechiae, then it can eventually finally cause, after forming a cyclitic membrane, finally cause a hypotony. Okay. Then you should also know what are the pupil signs. Now in cases of acute cases, there is generally miosis, and in chronic cases, the pupil becomes irregularly dilated. Like I said, you get a festooned pupil. Then there is also something called as occlusio pupillae, wherein you have a blocked pupil, and this is mainly because of the organization of the exudates across the pupil. Now how is the intraocular pressure? In acute cases, the intraocular pressure is raised. Now this is because of trabeculitis or clogging up of the trabecular meshwork of these inflammatory cells. Okay. Whereas in chronic cases, the IOP is decreased. Now this is because, like I said, of a ciliary body shutdown or an atrophy of the ciliary body. So now coming to the complications. Okay, one is you have a complicated cataract. Now this is the most common complication of anterior uveitis seen among the pediatric age group. Okay, then you have a band-shaped keratopathy. Now this is nothing but deposition of calcium in the Bowman's layer of the cornea. Then you have cystoid macular edema. Now remember, this is the most common cause of loss of vision of a posterior segment involvement in anterior uveitis. Then you have phthisis bulbi, now wherein you have a soft and a shrunken eyeball. Okay. Then you also have a secondary glaucoma. Now it can either be an open angle glaucoma, secondary open angle glaucoma because of trabeculitis or clogging up of the trabecular meshwork with the inflammatory cells, or it can be an angle closure glaucoma. Now, if a posterior synechiae is present, then because of a post-inflammatory glaucoma, like I've already told you before, it can lead to a secondary angle closure glaucoma, wherein treatment is you do a laser iridotomy. Now in case if it is not successful and if it is a chronic secondary angle closure glaucoma, then we can plan for a trabeculectomy. Fine. So coming to the last part of the session is treatment. So treatment is mainly mydriatic and cycloplegic agents. Now how do they help? They basically prevent or break the posterior synecdoche formation. One, they relieve the ciliary spasm, and the last one is they decrease the hyperemia and congestion. So most commonly used drugs are you use a tropicamide, either 0.5% or 1%, or a cyclopentolate, again 0.5% or 1%, or a home atropine 2% and atropine, which is 1%. Or you can use topical steroids. Now they mainly help to control the inflammation. So for the treatment you use a combination of steroids plus a mydriatic and a cycloplegic agents. Fine. Now one important thing which you have to know is pilocarpine and lanterneprost are contraindicated to control IOP and hypertensive uveitis. Why? Because the side effect of these drugs itself is uveitis, and hence it is not used. So with that, we come to an end of this session. I think I've made it much easier for you. Hope you all liked it. Thank you and have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.